Okay, let's move on to my second topic. So I want to talk about how Apple has quietly begun to dominate the premiere TV slot, and the biggest evidence of that is like how many Emmy nominations they've gotten
Mhm.
for their shows. So the 2026 Emmy nominations were just announced. HBO got 122. Obviously, right? Like that's the premier like streaming platform for like high quality television. So no surprise there. Netflix was second with 111,
Mhm.
but then Apple TV has quietly become number three with 81. And so, what I think is like super interesting about that is the fact that their library is way smaller compared to Netflix, right? Who constantly seems to be like putting out that content.
Yes.
They also spend almost nothing promoting their shows, the traditional sense. I mean, like, we
Mhm.
talk about that here all the time, right? But what they have shown is that they have a track record for choosing the correct shows that, like, if I only hear about Severance and Ted Lasso, I'm going to go ahead and trust that Widow's Bay
Mhm.
is going to be good, right? And that's exactly what's happened, right? Their word of mouth is like compared to most other like upstream platforms is just unheard of, right? Like that's
Mhm.
the way that most of us hear about their shows, even like the smaller ones, right? Like I was on Slow Horses like from the beginning, and that
Mhm.
became a word of mouth show. Like I think around like season 3 or 4, where people were finding like, oh, okay, this is a show that I have to pay attention
Mhm.
to. It's amazing. We got to watch it. And so that's something that they're now like more well known for. And I think what's really interesting here for marketers is realizing that like you can have cultural authority from having an audience that chooses you based
Mhm.
on word of mouth and not your marketing spend, right? Like obviously
Yep.
Netflix is out here spending a lot more money trying to get you to watch shows. I mean, Stranger Things, like all those collaborations that they
Oh, yeah.
had, that ended up being kind of like a huge fail. We talked about that
Mhm.
here because like it didn't really seem to make sense.
Mm-mm.
But then B, like the show itself was not really that good that last final season, right? Like it
Yep.
got pretty widely panned. And it's like, well, maybe if you hadn't spent as much money on marketing and focused
You
on the
don't know
show
into the
being
show.
good, like maybe that would have been a better use of money. And I feel with like Apple and like HBO are pretty much, neck and neck in terms of like if it shows up on that platform, there's already a degree of trust that I have. And it's also slowly curating itself as like the sci-fi and
Mhm.
fantasy, streaming platform, which I think is like, a good space for it to be because it fits with like the narrative of, that's what Apple is known for, right?
Yes.
Technology. So it fits that. But then it's also carving itself a lane for craft storytelling narrative,
Mhm.
right? Like, which it kind of got by going after the directors that are like, high class, right? Like working with directors like Martin Scorsese and Guillermo
Mhm.
del Toro, but they're also doing it in terms of like the technology that they're building, right? Like one of the biggest reasons why I think F1 was also able to fall into this craft versus like AI narrative was because like one of the marketing things that they put out was how they built out a camera that would be able to film the cars as they were
Mhm.
racing because no other technology could do that. And so it's, really falling back on that. Like Apple builds really cool products that do really cool things. And so that's, it fits into this narrative. So like people understand it and are like willing to give them a chance. And that's where, these other streaming platforms are kind of starting to fail, right? Like this week we heard that like Netflix is thinking about doing like channels that'll be on 24/7. And it's
It's
like, oh,
like,
so you're just now going to become like regular TV? Like, how does that fit into the narrative of what this company is?
like,
One company that I am keeping an eye out for that I think is starting to realize kind of like the narrative behind the streaming platform that they can be is Amazon, because
mhm.
what they're starting to do is become the place that creates shows and scripts based off of books.
Mhm.
Which is like if you go back to like the OG Amazon, like what they're known for is being a bookseller, right? So if
Yep.
they're able to convert themselves into like the streaming platform that like creates shows from books that they know they have the data for that shows you that people are reading, so they'll then want to watch a show. We saw that with like the success from Off Campus recently, right?
Mhm.
Where they know that people are reading those books, women are reading those books, so they
Yes.
know that they're going to have like initial fan base, right? They're doing that similarly with the Love Hypothesis,
Mhm.
the Lord of the Rings, that's a book, right? Jack Reacher, that's a book. Jack Ryan, that's another book, right? So these are all properties that they are now, have the IP for based on the book. So that's a complete angle that they could go after and like own because
Mhm.
like it makes sense for their brand. And I think each of the streaming platforms really really need to start figuring out what is it people, come to us for? What do they know us for? And do they actually come here to view those shows? And that's where I think like Netflix, not even just with this, having the channels going on in the background, but they're starting to default to having a lot of like reality TV shows or shows that you can have on the
Yeah.
background, right? Like their whole like podcast network that they're building out. Is that really the type of streaming platform that you want to be known as? The one that that people have on the
Mhm.
background and don't actually pay attention to? Something for them to
Yeah.
consider.
No, it's very true. It does feel like Netflix is becoming more and more just trying to be everything to everyone and
Mhm.
not really being anything super great. I mean, they do
Mhm.
have occasional things. Definitely, I feel like, yeah, they leaned into the reality TV, which I have nothing against reality TV. It's just not, I was like original reality TV.
Yeah.
But now they have obviously a lot of really great documentaries. They're known for that. The
Mhm.
running joke right now on social media of like, what is the next Netflix documentary? It's a
Mhm.
documentary about Netflix making documentaries. And so
I didn't see that.
yeah, I'm seeing that trend come out.
Oh, that's so funny.
And like because there's so many
Mhm.
never-ending stories, though. We'll say there, but they do. I don't feel like I get on there knowing what I'm like want to watch when I
Yeah.
get on versus like well, yeah, when I get on Amazon or I get on Apple, they are much more about quality. I feel like over quantity and like very
Mhm.
specific things and like shows and like you said with Amazon and book community is huge. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely you was got back into reading during the pandemic because of
Mm.
book product and getting back into just loving and being immersed in that, and that has just exploded again
Mhm.
and the rise of audiobooks and everything. So yeah, it's a perfect brand alignment for Amazon versus yeah, again, with Netflix shows and what they produce and how they try to market, it's just like in everything. Like if
Yeah.
it's an option, let's do it. And I'm like, that's when you're trying to speak to everyone and be great for everyone. We know as marketers, you're just not going to hit anything. You're not
Yeah.
going to hit anybody right. Nobody's going to connect with it. You need to really find your audience. Basic marketing 101 and
Yeah.
hit them. It could be maybe a response to just all the competition. You know, they really were the first to the game and
Mhm.
leading it. And they're just, as a marketer, I am never feel comfortable like adjusting my marketing or my like strategy or anything like that in response to competition. I'm always like,
Mhm.
let's wait. Like, hold on. Like, is that like an actual reason for us to do that other than our competition is doing it?
Mhm.
Does it make sense for our audience? Does it make sense for what they want and what they're looking for and how they like to be reached? So yeah, I think maybe Netflix needs to kind of get back to some of that initial traditional marketing 101 of what does their audience want, and it is something that we're seeing more with Amazon and Apple. I mean, and I didn't even realize it, but I agree with the it's a lot of word of mouth with some of these things as well. A lot of organic social
Yep.
that is building on these different shows. We watch a lot of on. I mean, I have a love hate relationship with Severance.
Yeah.
I joke because like I'm like every episode they answer one question and they add like 10 more to my
Yeah.
of what's going on. And I'm like so I have to keep watching because
Yeah.
they give me a little and but it
Have you
is
watched Widow's Day?
I haven't, but it is on my list. It is on my
Yeah.
list. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So that was one of those ones, like, I'm not big on horror,
Mhm.
these days, but, I like Matthew Rhys and I
Mhm.
like the concept. I thought the concept was interesting, so I thought I'd give it a chance.
Yeah.
I did ask, like, my Twitter community, I'm like, "Is this, like, real horror, or is it just, like, the different" what do they call it? Elevated horror.
Mhm.
And so they said it's not really scary in the like, gory sense. It's more
Mhm.
like, just like weird, odd type of horror, which is kind of like what it ended up being. But yeah, the fact that they got so many nominations for
Mhm.
being pretty much a brand new show is kind of wild and shows just how much Hollywood has changed in order to
Mhm.
like allow Apple to just kind of swoop in and grab all these
Yeah.
nominations that might have gone to like another show that like has been around a lot longer, right? I also wanted to point out that YouTube has gotten nominations.
Mhm.
So it's like, it's more obviously for like YouTube content, but it's showing that like YouTube is kind of building up its own repertoire of
Mhm.
shows that YouTube is known for and good at, right? So that's something like keep an eye out there. But then another one to call out is that Paramount Plus only got one nomination, and that's like creating, shows and used to be one of like the big shows that used to get lots of nominations. So it's, they have content, they're a legacy brand with, CBS, but it's showing that it's not working culturally anymore
Mhm.
for both the folks that like vote for the Emmys, but then also for the people that are watching them, right? Okay, so a couple lessons for me is that curation is a strategy, not a compromise. I think Apple really did very well by choosing those few shows that they wanted to focus on and to start attracting that word of mouth like audience instead of trying to, put every show that they could the way that Netflix is, right? By being curated, they've built up trust with their audience that now trust that pretty much every TV show that comes on is something that I should at least watch the trailer for.
Mhm.
And obviously, I mean, they're coming out with more and more content, so there's not I can't watch everything, but certainly I'll pay attention to it, from the get-go because I know that Apple is to be trusted. Whereas with Netflix, like, I don't really have tentpole shows that I like watch there anymore. I mean, it used to be, House of Cards and like Orange is the
Yeah.
New Black, like, but that was like ages ago, right? With Stranger
Mhm.
Things, like I watched the first couple seasons, but completely
Sure. Yep.
fell off because it took so long to get there. And now I'm like, not really in a place that I want to be watching that,
Same.
watching the show, and then I come out I find out that, like, the reviews are terrible for those seasons, like,
Mhm.
why would I spend that much more time with a show that I was, like, wasn't really on board with anyway? So, that's another lesson here is, like, your cultural credibility matters so much more. Netflix is learning that in real time that, like, you can't be the prestige option and then be the reality TV option as well because you're diluting both because your audience starts thinking about you as like
Mhm.
the reality TV show hub and not the place that has these like prestige TV
Yep.
shows. So Apple should also keep that in mind if they ever think about going the reality TV
Sure.
show route. And then the last lesson is that one show that people feel something about and are advocating for and getting their friends to watch is worth so much more than having
Mhm.
50 average ones that no one ever follows. And I want to call out that recently there was an article that came out that gets people in season one and starts losing them for season two and season three. And
Mhm.
I think part of the reason why that's happening is because they don't let shows play out, right? If you look at
Yep.
Apple, Severance, Slow Horses, Silo, all those shows took a while to get to where their audiences
Yep.
are like full on advocating for them. Like, you
Mhm.
have to watch this show. It didn't happen after season one. But if Apple had been like, well, the numbers aren't really great, we should just cancel it, then you're not giving the shows time to find that cultural
Yeah.
relevance that they now have. And those are the shows that are now getting Emmy nominated. So that's definitely something for, companies to think about where it's like maybe your customer doesn't get your thing right at the
Mhm.
beginning, but give them a chance to learn, build out that world with them, start
Yep.
inviting them more and like getting them involved. And then they'll start being a better referral network than if you just kind of write them off and say that, like, oh, they didn't get the concept. Let's move on to something else. Sometimes you have
Mhm.
to let the marketing stew a little bit before you move on from it. And last one that I just remembered is that kudos to Apple because a lot of us marketers have been ragging on them for years that they don't put enough like marketing budget
Mhm.
behind their shows because guess what? They won, like
Yeah.
they're
They knew
actually
what they were doing, for sure.
right? They've built out this like, word of mouth referral network for their
Mhm.
shows and trust in them that like now that if they were to put their marketing budget behind it, it'll be so much easier and so much cheaper because now you're just pouring fuel on the fire
Yep.
instead of having to build out the fire and figure out which shows work for which audience.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many great kind of takeaways, just basic, again, basic marketing, getting to it from what they're doing. Like you said, with the world building, we've talked about it a couple times, but it's not an immediate. It really is a long process,
Mm.
and you connect more with it as a viewer, as a consumer. I will say I work in the B2B space with very, 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 very long sales.
Yeah.
So it is. I love, and I think I'm gonna take it back to my team. Like the idea, of, it's a world building. Like we
Yeah.
haven't spent so much time, like just educating and provide being a resource, and like not even getting to the sale, to the hook of the show, however you want to tie that back
Hmm.
together. But it is so much about that than it is about that initial like buy now.
Right.
Or the big thing. It is building that relationship, and that's what I mean, you do that with a show. It's like when I commit to a show, commit
Hmm.
show, like,
Yeah.
I'm like, it is building a relationship,
Hmm.
and remembering that as marketers, and then, I mean, just tying everything we talked about, the quality over quantity. And
Yeah.
I think it is going to continue to see it in the consumers and future generations of like, they don't want just more and more. Like, we have more content than we know what to do
Yeah.
with our brains can process.
Yeah.
Everyone wants quality, and that's what's going to make you stand out in your marketing or in your TV shows or anything.
Mhm.
Quality is going to be key.
Yeah, definitely.